Good morning. This is Mrs. Barber coming to you from Mrs. Barber's home, reaching out to you in your homes across the county. I wanted to wish you a happy Wednesday. Today is the third day of Spirit Week, so today you will either wear your school spirit shirt or you'll wear a school uniform shirt. Take a picture of yourself, email it to me, and I will be sure to put it on our Instagram page. I will share it then with the wonderful Miss Masters, who may put it on our Facebook page, and then we'll consider which ones are for the yearbook. At any rate, make sure that you know, even if you're not using your agenda, what you have to complete for my class. First of all, any missing assignments are always welcome. If they say test or quiz in pcsb.org or in Google Classroom, they count more than anything else. Make sure that you make up any missing work. This week already, you have done chapters 14, 15, and 16. Make sure that you have taken your time, taken a picture that's legible, and sent them to me. Also, make sure that you're keeping your spiral nice and neat, that you have all the GIVER notes wherever you may have them, and that you have gotten written permission from your parents emailed to me that they are allowing you to watch the movie when we're finished taking notes on the book. Today we'll be doing chapters 17 and 18 of The Giver by Lois Lowry. All right, I'll be reading out loud, and you will get out your spiral now. You're going to put at the top, chapter 17. I will be having you join me as I read. You can read along and listen and take notes. And when you're finished, of course, you're going to make sure you have the label chapters 17 and 18, and you're going to send it to my email. And these notes are actually due today. Chapter 17. Today is declared an unscheduled holiday. Jonas, his parents, and Lily all turned in surprise and looked at the wall speaker from which the announcement had come. It happened so rarely and was such a treat for the entire community when it did. Adults were exempted from the day's work, children from school and training and volunteer hours. The substitute laborers, who would be given a different holiday, took over all the necessary tasks: nurturing, food delivery, and care of the old. And the community was free. So go ahead and put that down in your notes, that today is declared an announcement of a holiday, an unscheduled holiday. You know how we all love unscheduled holidays. I bet we won't want one as long as this again in the near future. Okay. Jonas cheered and put his homework folder down. He had been about to leave for school. School was less important to him now, and before much more time passed, his formal schooling would end. But still, for 12s, though they had begun their adult training, there were the endless list of rules to be memorized and the newest technology to be mastered. He wished his parents, sister, and Gabe a happy day and rode down the bicycle path looking for Asher. He had not taken the pills now for 4 weeks. Put that down. Jonas had stopped taking the pills for 4 weeks. The stirrings had returned, and he felt a little guilty and embarrassed about the pleasurable dreams that came to him as he slept. But he knew he couldn't go back to the world of no feelings that he had lived in so long. And his new heightened feelings permeated a greater realm than simply his sleep. Though he knew that his failure to take the pills accounted for some of it, he thought that the feelings came also from the memories. Now he could see all of the colors, and he could keep them too, so that the trees and grass and bushes stayed green in his vision. Gabriel's rosy cheeks stayed pink even when he slept, and apples were always, always red. Now, through the memories, he had seen oceans and mountain lakes and streams that gurgled through woods, and now he saw the familiar wide river beside the path differently. He saw all of the light and color and history it contained, and carried in its slow-moving water. And he knew that there was an elsewhere from which it came, and an elsewhere to which it was going. So put in your notes that Jonas can see all of the colors now because he has stopped taking the pill. On this unexpected casual holiday, he felt happy, as he always had on holidays, but with a deeper happiness than ever before. Thinking, as he always did, about precision of language, Jonas realized that it was a new depth of feelings that he was experiencing. Somehow they were not at all the same as the feelings that every evening, in every dwelling, every citizen analyzed with endless talk. I felt anger because someone broke the play area rules, Lily had said once, making a fist with her small hand to indicate her fury. Her family, Jonas among them, had talked about the possible reasons for rule breaking and the need for understanding and patience until Lily's fist had relaxed and her anger was gone. But Lily had not felt anger, Jonas realized now. Shallow impatience and exasperation, that was what Lily had felt. He knew that with certainty because now he knew what anger was. Now he had, in the memories, experienced injustice and cruelty, and he'd reacted with rage that welled up so passionately inside him that the thought of discussing it calmly at the evening meal was unthinkable. I felt sad today, he had heard his mother say, and they had comforted her. But now Jonas had experienced real sadness. He had felt grief. He knew that there was no quick comfort for emotions like those. These were deeper, and they did not need to be told, they were felt. Today, he felt happiness. Asher! He spied his friend's bicycle leaning against a tree at the edge of the playing field. Nearby, other bikes were strewn about on the ground. On a holiday, the usual rules of order could be disregarded. He skidded to a stop and dropped his own bike beside the others. "Hey, Ash!" he shouted, looking around. There seemed to be no one in the play area. "Where are you?" Psst. A child's voice came from behind a nearby bush, made the sound. Pow, pow, pow. A female 11 named Tanya staggered forward from where she had been hiding. Dramatically, she clutched her stomach and stumbled about in a zigzag pattern, groaning. "You got me," she called, and fell to the ground, grinning. Blam! Jonas, standing on the side of the playing field, recognized Asher's voice. He saw his friend aiming an imaginary weapon in his hand, dart from behind one tree to another. Blam! "You're in my line of ambush, Jonas. Watch out." Jonas stepped back. He moved behind Asher's bike and knelt so that he was out of sight. It was a game he had often played with the other children. A game of good guys and bad guys, a harmless pastime that used up their contained energy and ended only when they all lay poised in freakish postures on the ground. He'd never recognized it before as a game of war. So please put down, Jonas's friends are playing a game of war. Of course, none of them know what that really means. So Jonas's friends are playing a game of war. "Attack!" The shout came from behind the small storehouse where play equipment was kept. 3 children dashed forward, their imaginary weapons in firing position. From the opposite side of the field came an opposing shout. "Counterattack!" From their hiding places, a horde of children, Jonas recognized Fiona in the group, emerged, running in a crouched position, firing across the field. Several of them stopped, grabbed their own shoulders and chest with exaggerated gestures, and pretended to be hit. They dropped to the ground and lay, suppressing giggles. Feelings surged within Jonas. He found himself walking forward into the field. "You're hit, Jonas!" Asher yelled from behind the tree. "Pow! You're hit again!" Jonas stood alone in the center of the field. Several of the children raised their heads and looked at him uneasily. The attacking army slowed, emerged from their crouched positions, and watched to see what he was doing. In his mind, Jonas saw again the face of the boy who had lain dying on a field and had begged him for water. He had a sudden choking feeling, as if it were difficult to breathe. One of the children raised an imaginary rifle and made an attempt to destroy him with a firing noise. Pshoo! Then they were all silent, standing awkwardly, and the only sound was the sound of Jonas's shuddering breaths. He was struggling not to cry. So put in your notes that Jonas doesn't see this as a silly game anymore of childhood. He has experienced real war, and he knows how awful it is. You can pause this if you need to take more time to write. Remember, your notes need to be legible. So Jonas has experienced real war, and he does not see this game as something frivolous and silly to do. Gradually, when nothing happened, nothing changed, the children looked at each other nervously and went away. He heard the sounds as they righted their bicycles and began to ride down the path that led on from the field. Only Asher and Fiona remained. "What's wrong, Jonas?" "It was only a game," Fiona said. "You ruined it," Asher said in an irritated voice. "Don't play it anymore," Jonas pleaded. "I'm the one who's training for assistant recreation director," Asher pointed out angrily. "Games aren't your area of expertise or expertness." "Expertise," Jonas corrected him automatically. "Whatever. You can't say what we can play, even if you are going to be the new receiver." Asher looked warily at him. "I apologize for not paying you the respect you deserve," he mumbled. "Asher," Jonas said. He was trying to speak carefully and with kindness, to say exactly what he wanted to say. "You had no way of knowing this. I didn't know it myself until recently, but it's a cruel game. In the past, there have..." "I said I apologize, Jonas." Jonas sighed. It was no use. Of course Asher couldn't understand. "I accept your apology, Asher," he said warily. "Do you want to go for a ride along the river, Jonas?" Fiona asked, biting her lip with nervousness. Jonas looked at her. She was so lovely. For a fleeting instant, he thought he would like nothing better than to ride peacefully along the river path, laughing and talking with his gentle female friend. But he knew that such times had been taken away from him now. He shook his head. After a moment, his two friends turned and went to their bikes. He watched as they rode away. So put in your notes that Jonas has definitely changed and can't seem to enjoy the simple fun of being a kid. So Jonas has changed. He can't seem to be able to enjoy the simple fun of being a kid. Jonas trudged to the bench beside the storehouse and sat down, overwhelmed with feelings of loss. His childhood, his friendships, his carefree sense of security, all of these things seemed to be slipping away. With his new heightened feelings, he was overwhelmed by sadness at the way the others had laughed and shouted, playing at war. But he knew that they could not understand why, without the memories. He felt such love for Asher and Fiona, but they could not feel it back without the memories, and he could not give them those. Jonas knew with certainty that he could change nothing. How frustrating, huh? Back in their dwelling that evening, Lily chattered merrily about the wonderful holiday she had had, playing with her friends, having her midday meal out of doors, and, she confessed, sneaking a very short try on her father's bicycle. "I can't wait till I get my very own bicycle next month. Father's too big for me, I feel." She explained matter-of-factly. "Good thing Gabe isn't in the child's seat, or wasn't in the child's seat." "A good thing," Mother agreed, frowning at the idea of it. Gabriel waved his arms at the mention of himself. He had begun to walk just the week before. The first steps of a new child were always the occasion for celebration at the nurturing center. Father said, but also for the introduction of a discipline wand. Now Father brought the slender instrument home with him each night in case Gabriel misbehaved. But he was a happy and easygoing toddler. Now he moved unsteadily across the room laughing. "Gay," he chirped, "gay." It was the way he said his own name. Jonas brightened. It had been a depressing day for him after such a bright start, but he set his glum thoughts aside. He thought about starting to teach Lily to ride so that she could speed off proudly after her ceremony of 9, which would be coming soon. It was hard to believe that it was almost December again, that almost a year had passed since he had become a 12. So put in your notes that almost a year had passed since Jonas had become a 12. He smiled as he watched the new child plant one small foot carefully before the other, grinning with glee at his own steps as he tried them out. "I want to get to sleep early tonight," Father said. "Tomorrow is a busy day for me. The twins are being born tomorrow, and the test results show that they are identical." "One for here, one for elsewhere," Lily chanted. "One for here, one for else." "Do you actually take it elsewhere, Father?" Jonas asked. "No, I just have to make the selection. I weigh them, hand the larger one over to the nurturer who's standing by, waiting, and then I get the smaller one all cleaned up and comfy. Then I perform a small ceremony of release, and," he glanced down, grinning at Gabriel, "then I wave, 'Bye-bye,'" he said in a special, sweet voice he used when he spoke to the new child. He waved his hand in the familiar gesture. Gabriel giggled and waved goodbye back to him. "And somebody else comes to get him, suddenly from elsewhere?" "That's right, Jonas Bonus." Jonas rolled his eyes in embarrassment that his father had used the silly pet name. Lily was deep in thought. What if they give the little twin a name elsewhere? A name like, maybe Jonathan. And then here, in our community, at his naming, the twin that we kept here is given the name Jonathan. And then there would be 2 children with the same name. And they would look exactly the same. And someday, maybe when they were a 6, one group of 6s would go to visit another community on a bus. And there in the other community, in the other group of 6s, would be a Jonathan who was exactly the same as the other Jonathan. And then maybe they would get mixed up and take the wrong Jonathan home. And maybe his parents wouldn't notice. And then, she paused for breath. "Lily," Mother said, "I have a wonderful idea. Maybe when you become a 12, they'll give you the assignment of storyteller. I don't think we've had a storyteller in the community for a long time, but if I were on the committee, I would definitely choose you for that job." So put down that tomorrow, Father has the task of releasing a newborn twin. Okay. Father has the task of releasing a newborn twin. Chapter 18. Oh, I'm so sorry. Almost chapter 18. Lily grinned. "I have a better idea for one more story," she announced. "What if actually we were all twins and didn't know it? And so elsewhere there would be another Lily, and another Jonas, and another Father, and another Asher, and another Chief Elder, and another..." Father groaned. "Lily," he said, "it's bedtime." Chapter 18. "Giver," Jonas asked the next morning, "do you ever think about release?" "Do you mean my own release or just the general topic of release?" "Both, I guess. I apologize. I should have been more precise, but I don't know exactly what I meant." "Sit back up. No need to lie down while we're talking." Jonas had already been stretched out on the bed when the question came to his mind, and sat back up. I guess I do think about it occasionally," the giver said. "I think about my own release when I'm in an awful lot of pain. I wish I could put in a request for it sometimes, but I'm not permitted to do that until the new receiver is trained." "Me," Jonas said in a dejected voice. He was not looking forward to the end of the training when he could become the new receiver. It was clear to him what a terribly difficult and lonely life it was, despite the honor. I can't request release either, Jonas pointed out. It was in my rules. The giver laughed harshly. I know that. They hammered out those rules after the failure 10 years ago. Jonas had heard again and again now reference to the previous failure, but he still did not know what had happened 10 years before. Giver, he said, tell me what happened, please. The giver shrugged. On the surface, it was quite simple. A receiver-to-be was selected the way you were. The selection went smoothly enough. The ceremony was held and the selection was made. The crowd cheered as they did for you. The new receiver was puzzled and a little frightened, as you were. My parents told me it was a female. The giver nodded. Jonas thought of his favorite female, Fiona, and shivered. He wouldn't want his gentle friend to suffer the way he had, taking on the memories. What was she like, he asked the giver. The giver looked sad, thinking about it. She was a remarkable young lady, very self-possessed and serene, intelligent, eager to learn. He shook his head and drew a deep breath. You know, Jonas, when she came to me in this room, when she presented herself to begin her training, Jonas interrupted him with a question. Can you tell me her name? My parents said that it wasn't to be spoken again in the community, but couldn't you say it to just me? The giver hesitated briefly, or painfully rather, as if saying the name aloud might be excruciating. Her name was Rosemary, he told Jonas finally. Rosemary, I like that name. So please put down in your notes that the last receiver in training was a girl, and her name was Rosemary. Take a moment, pause the video if you need to. The last receiver in training was a girl. Her name was Rosemary, and we know that it failed, her training. The giver went on. When she came to me for the first time, she sat there in the chair where you sat on your first day. She was eager and excited and a little scared. We talked. I tried to explain things as well as I could, the way you did to me. The giver chuckled ruefully. The explanations are difficult. The whole thing is so beyond one's experience, but I tried, and she listened carefully. Her eyes were very luminous, I remember. You know, luminous means like shining. He looked up suddenly. Jonas, I have a memory that I told you was my favorite. I gave it to you. I still have a shred of it left. The room with the family and the grandparents? Jonas nodded. Of course he remembered. Yes, he said. It had that wonderful feeling with it. You told me it was love. Yes, you can understand then. Then that's what I felt for Rosemary, the giver explained. I loved her. I feel it for you too, he nodded. What happened to her, Jonas asked. Her training began. She received well as you do. She was so enthusiastic, so delighted to experience new things. I remember her laughter. His voice faltered and trailed off. What happened? Jonas asked again after a moment. Please tell me. The giver closed his eyes. It broke my heart, Jonas, to transfer pain to her. But it was my job. It was what I had to do, the way I've had to do it to you. The room was silent. Jonas waited. Finally, the giver continued. 5 weeks. That was all. I gave her happy memories, a ride on a merry-go-round, a kitten to play with, a picnic. Sometimes I chose one just because I knew it would make her laugh, and I so treasured the sound of that laughter in this room that had always been so silent. But she was like you, Jonas. She wanted to experience everything. She knew that it was her responsibility, and so she asked me for more difficult memories. Jonas held his breath for a moment. You didn't give her war, did you? Not after just 5 weeks. The giver shook his head and sighed. No, and I didn't give her physical pain. But I gave her loneliness, and I gave her loss, and I transferred a memory of a child taken from its parents. That was the first one. she appeared stunned at its end. So put in your notes, please, that the giver gave memories that were painful to Rosemary, but he didn't give war, and he didn't give physical pain. He gave experiences like loneliness and a child being taken from its parents. That one was the first one. Make sure you know that the feeling of a child being taken from its parents was the first memory that Rosemary had. Jonas swallowed. Rosemary and her laughter had begun to seem real to him, and he pictured her looking up from the bed of memories, shocked. The giver continued. I backed off, gave her more little delights, but everything changed once she knew about pain. I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't brave enough, Jonas suggested. The giver didn't respond to the question. She insisted that I continue, that I not spare her. She said it was her duty, and I knew, of course, that she was correct. I couldn't bring myself to inflict physical pain on her, but I gave her anguish of many kinds. Poverty and hunger and terror. I had to, Jonas. It was my job, and she had been chosen. The giver looked at him imploringly. Jonas stroked his hand. Finally, one afternoon, we finished for the day. It had been a hard session. I tried to finish, as I do with you, by transferring something happy and cheerful. But the times of laughter were gone by then. She stood up very silently, frowning, as if she were making a decision, and then she came over to me and put her arms around me, and she kissed my cheek. As Jonas watched, the giver stroked his own cheek, recalling the touch of Rosemary's lips 10 years before. She left here that day, left this room, and did not go back to her dwelling. I was notified by the speaker that she had gone directly to the chief elder and had asked to be released. But that's against the rules. The receiver in training can't apply for It's in your rules, Jonas. But it wasn't in hers. She asked for release, and they had to give it to her. I never saw her again. So put that in your notes, that sadly Rosemary asked for release, which to them meant going to another community, and they had to give it to her. So that was the failure, Jonas thought. It was obvious that it saddened the giver very deeply, but it didn't seem such a terrible thing after all. And he, Jonas, would never have done it, never have requested release, no matter how difficult his training became. The giver needed a successor, and he had been chosen. A thought occurred to Jonas. Rosemary had been released very early in her training. What if something happened to him, Jonas? He had a whole year's worth of memories now. Giver, he asked, I can't request release, I know that. But what if something happened, an accident? What if I fell into the river like the little four Caleb did? Well, that doesn't make much sense because I'm a good swimmer, but what if I couldn't swim and fell into the river and was lost? Then there wouldn't be a new receiver. But you would already have given away an awful lot of important memories, so even though they would select a new receiver, the memories would be gone, except for the shreds that you have left of them. And then what if... He started to laugh suddenly. I sound like my sister, Lily, he said, amused at himself. The giver looked at him gravely. You just stay away from the river, my friend, he said. The community lost Rosemary after 5 weeks, and it was a disaster for them. I don't know what the community would do if they lost you. Why was it a disaster? I think I mentioned it to you once, the giver reminded him, that when she was gone, the memories came back to the people. Remember when he said that? The memories rushed back into everyone. If you were to be lost in the river, Jonas, your memories would not be lost with you. Memories are forever. Rosemary had only those 5 weeks worth, and most of them were good ones. But there were those few terrible memories, the ones that had overwhelmed her. For a while, they overwhelmed the community. all those feelings. They've never experienced that before. I was so devastated by my own grief at her loss and my own feeling of failure that I didn't even try to help them through it. I was angry too. The giver was quiet for a moment, obviously thinking, he said finally, if they lost you with all the training you've had now, they'd have all those memories again themselves. Jonas made a face. They'd hate that. They certainly would. They wouldn't know how to handle with it all. The only way I deal with it is by having you there to help me, Jonas pointed out with a sigh. The giver nodded. I suppose, he said slowly, that I could. You could what? The giver was still deep in thought. After a moment, he said, if you floated off in the river, I suppose I could help the whole community the way I've helped you. It's an interesting concept. I need to think about it some more. Maybe we'll talk about it again sometime, but not now. I'm glad you're a good swimmer, Jonas, but stay away from the river. He laughed a little, but the laughter was not lighthearted. His thoughts seemed to be elsewhere, and his eyes were very troubled. So please put in your notes that if anything happened to Jonas, all of the memories that he's collected would rush back to the community, and they would have a terrible time dealing with those memories. We'll end here today, and I hope that you have a blessed day. Get all your work done, submitted, and be a blessing to your families. See you tomorrow.